afternoon. Welcome to Truth Talk. We are delighted to have you back with us for episode 5, and we are thrilled to have another guest with us today. It has been a season of special guests for us so far, and we are excited to welcome Dr. Amir Kainer. He is president of Truett McConnell University in Cleveland, Georgia, and we're going to talk about several different topics. As we do, we're usually shooting from the hip. We have some idea, but our conversation sometimes leads us, but really talking about the importance of Christian education and why, as a member of the Christ following community, it is important for us to instill Christian education into our families. It's just not a student that fits the ages of students. It is a lifetime of learning. And so welcome, Dr. Kainer.
Thank you.
Dr. Kainer, first of all, if you would just give us a brief history of the university and how you got involved and bring us up to date with that, and then we'll sort of go from there.
Well, the university was birthed out of a prayer session at First Baptist Blairsville and was born, chartered in 1946, first class in 1947. It really was a junior college all the way up into the 2000s. I came in 2008, and we were able to birth a university that has now 10 schools, 6 different master's degrees, 22 sports, and every degree is filtered not only through the lens of the Word of God, but every student has to have a Great Commission minor in order to graduate.
Wonderful. So there is an emphasis from the Word of God on everything that y'all are involved in and do there.
Yeah, it'd be a great danger just to pray over a Freudian theory or evolutionary theory. So the primary textbook for every class, regardless of the subject, is always Scripture.
And just briefly, we know, but some of our folks listening may not know your history of coming to the Lord. And I know it's just like everybody else's, but go ahead and tell them anyhow.
Well, yeah, dad Turkish, mom Swedish, wife Czech, and we immigrated here to the States. I was the only one born here. I was the anchor baby, I guess, for that immigration group, and grew up Muslim until revival service in a very small Baptist church up in Columbus, Ohio, where I came to know the Lord Christ because of a bus ministry that invited me to church.
Amen. That speaks something, too, for all of us trying to do ministries. You never know which ministry it is going to reach somebody. So all the time saying, well, this may not work or that may not work. It's amazing what does work in the ministries. So as we work our way through this, tell us what the new world is happening there at Truett McConnell. What are the things y'all are adding and the things that are exciting there?
Well, after we added all these degrees in sports, we just did an inaugural season for tennis. We have 8 collegiate tennis courts that opened up yesterday. Actually, we have competitive gaming, esports, as a college sport. Right. And we just inaugurated shotgun as well. So they have shotgun, skeet, and clay as sports. These are all scholarship sports as well. And we just inaugurated the police academy. We're the only private university in the nation that attaches a 4-year degree to a police academy, and we have 20 students in our first class as we take a stand for those who take a stand for us.
And Jason, you have been on the board
in the past, yes.
Of Truett.
I've been off about a year now, but I served 5 years as a trustee at Truett.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to ask a question or talk about something there from Truett?
I got to see some of the behind-the-scene things, going on, what makes Truett, click and things like that. But could you just share your vision on what you want to see done and, kind of like Mandy began with, why is it so important that we send our children to a university like Truett?
So I've always told the students our goal is not to be the biggest. Our goal is to be the most biblical. And we're at a pace now where we're 90-some% full in our dorms. Classrooms are a premium, faculty space is out, so we have to move into a building program because we want 1,000 on campus. With graduate degrees, we're hoping to grow those to about 500. Online, we have 15 degrees. We're hoping to grow that to 500 and then 1,000. We already have nearly 2,000 dual enrollment students. So the birth of that type of vision is going to take a lot of God's people resourcing themselves and helping this next generation. It's not for us. It's for this next generation that are so lost. The survey just came out this week. As of that group and the group coming after, you have more than 70 million and 80% don't go to church, period. And it's the largest group of students not in any way attached to a church in at least a century, if not much longer. The last time I can remember in history we were in this desperate of trouble was right before the First Great Awakening, when only 11% of Americans had church membership.
And you read the surveys, and it can be so disheartening to read surveys. I was listening to an interview a couple of weeks ago with George Barna, and they were talking about within our leadership positions, only 6%, I believe is what he shared, of youth pastors say they believe that the Bible is accurate as far as the knowledge inside of it. And it gives you, that's why it's so important for us as churches, and especially churches and like us that are rural, that maybe don't have like dedicated pastoral positions because you're smaller and due to your congregation, so that we make sure from both the pulpit and we really drive into our teachers, those who are volunteering, biblical accuracy, biblical literacy, because that is, I think, the surveys bear out that experience, that this is why they're not active in church, because there's no authenticity, and they're not getting that authenticity in maybe some of, especially if we're really focused on what culture we live in instead of the culture we should be living out in our lives.
Well, the reason the student pastors do not have it is because the senior pastors don't have it. And now if you have any mentorship, and they don't, for the most part in churches, you only have 1 out of 7 churches that have a full-time youth pastor because they can't afford it, they're smaller, whatever it may be. But more than that, when I got called to ministry, my pastor pulled me aside and mentored me daily, weekly, allowed me to preach, walk through my biblical worldview. And frankly, when you're talking about someone who's going into ministry, it's not only the pastor that's mentoring him, but what state of affairs is the family in when anyone, can you imagine if we just said only 6% of youth had a biblical worldview? That's a problem that is not invested into the family. And finally, it's not invested into Sunday schools. When we have broken up Sunday schools to different things, we have forgotten that Sunday school is supposed to be an education. It's supposed to be a point where they get and grip the knowledge of the Word so they can get a passion for the Word. And we've run ahead of ourselves where passion is more important than knowledge instead of balancing those two.
Yeah, that's and it's a point that I see that Sunday school has stayed locked in the 60s and 70s, and it is not a tool that is used appropriately for the world we live in. It's not an educational source anymore. It's a place where a filler. They hand out a quarterly and have a person sit there that reads this quarterly to students, and students don't truly learn what they should be learning in the world in which we live in.
And another problem is I teach Sunday school and have taught just about all age ranges in Sunday school, and it's hard to find literature that it's not set up that way. So I end up piecemealing together, what our class wants to learn, and using, luckily, our pastor is my dad, so I get all, open access to when I need questions answered and stuff, but we have not as have any one place to find good resources to go deeper, to get out of that quarterly mindset. And so it is a challenge for the church community to fill in some of those things, because a lot of resources aren't set up as material to sit down and learn in a Sunday school atmosphere. I mean, there are lots of good books out there you can read and lots of good things, but they're not set up, they're not structured in a way that you can sit down with a Sunday school class that maybe is not doing the depth of research that, say, a teacher is doing, but that will keep them on track with learning something new. And I think that's a challenge for us as we're trying to grow students who have a desire to learn God's Word. That's a challenge as well, as teaching them. How do you teach them to do these things when our literature is not set up necessarily to teach them how to do those things?
Well, and there are a few out there, thankfully, but our own denomination has dropped the ball on this. And frankly, we used to have a structure. Even if we don't want to call it Sunday school, and we have to be more innovative, before you had an in-reach leader, an outreach leader, so you really were shepherding as the pastor was mentoring the group that the Lord gave you. Now, my wife does a lot of it with kids. we live in this pre-Christian age. The kids that are growing up now that are 5 years old up till about 14 have never even heard of Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. So you have to reset. And there are a few curriculums that are really strong in that. New Tribes Mission does it, From Creation to Christ. Answers in Genesis does a very good job with it. And for adults, for me, Jerry Vines's Vines by the Book gives you a skeletal outline that every teacher can use and build on with their own experiences and life experience and exposition. That's what I think we need at this point for Sunday schools.
Going back, and that's a whole issue there we could spend a lot of time on. Going back to the university itself, we went through this unique period of time back in 2022, time of COVID. What positive thing did you learn through that period of time for the university, and what negative thing do you see did y'all through that time?
The positive, whenever you're challenged, I think your faith is either going to have to step up or it's going to step back. Mm-hmm. That's life. So I'll never forget have to tell my students that for the last 6 weeks to go home on March 17th, 2020. It was just it. Mm-hmm. And I sat on my back porch, my home's on campus, and I knew I had to be more determined and more intentional. And so I literally, from the personal to the professional, I decided I was going to lose weight, and so I lost weight because the stress was so overwhelming. You could feel it, and you realized if the Lord wants me here, I have to take care of what He's given me. And then what it taught me was, you know what, I can't be in any way like the world and have the fear of the world. I do realize that precautions have to be taken, but frankly, we're adults. Mm-hmm. Each adult should take their risk, and no government should tell an adult what to do in this regard. So we had the only in-person graduation in the country, and we waited till June till it mitigated itself a little bit, and it was a great time, but it honored the students who had been there for 4 years. Mm-hmm. And we decided never to shut down ever again, regardless of what's going to happen in the future. So our students didn't fall behind. Mm-hmm. More than that, we didn't stop what they were doing. Every athletic sport went full-fledged. Every classroom was completely open, no mask required, unless maybe it was a front row, and we gave some comfort to professors that had some vulnerabilities. But we gave them full openness, and our students didn't fall behind in math. They didn't fall behind socially. They didn't fall behind. And that's the worst lesson socially that happened was socially the kids, especially 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds, are so far behind. We may have lost a generation unless parents spend 2-3 extra hours a day with them. Spiritually, the longer a church closed, the less likely it ever was to recover. And for churches to open up real quickly, they're far more back than those who didn't, because the people that were at churches that were trying to be careful and precautious and they stayed closed for long never went back. Yep. They needed a shepherd.
Yep.
I remember we took Marshall and Madden, but we spent some time up in Helen, and Amir was so gracious to us and brought us on campus. We were there. Jason was there for a trustees meeting, and so we just tagged along. And Amir gave us a personal tour of the entire campus. But what that did for Marshall was tremendous. He is now 13. Then he might have been, 11 or 12. But he is vested in a school that he knows, that he's been to, that he's excited about because he knows his parents know people there.
He's going to be taken care of.
And so I think that that's important. We were talking about how to get the young people to find it important to have Christian education. And, we don't know what God has planned for Marshall or where he's going to end up going to college one day or what he's going to end up doing. But as parents, for me, for him to have that experience and to walk the campus, he went up, we were in the little student center and walked up and ordered himself a drink and was walking around in the gym and the weight room. And, I think that sort of thing is important because it spoke to him that it's important to us that he have a vision for his future to be educated, but also gave us opportunities, and for Amir opportunities when he heard him speak about, how every aspect of the university is driven through Scripture. That is their basis, no matter what subject it is they're learning, because that's what we're trying to teach him in our home, and teach Madden as well, is that we don't always do things the way the world does things, because our home is driven biblically by what God has called us to do, and that folds into every aspect of our lives, whether it's now or whether it's the future. But having those kinds of opportunities, making time for those kinds of opportunities to feed into the young people that there is a place where you can be a Christian and still get educated and be comfortable there in who you are and who Christ has made you. Because in so many ways, it makes them stand out. Because Marshall will tell you, he doesn't know how many times, it's countless times we say, well, we don't do that. Mm-hmm. That's not how we do that in our house. Yes, that's how you're going to see some of your friends do that, or that's okay if that's how their family, but, as for me and my house, we serve the Lord, and he sees that, and as he's getting older, that's becoming more and more prevalent in the decisions he is starting to make, and as Madden comes up, and he will do the same. But to know that there is a place where, if so, that's where God leads him, that he can have that comfort of knowing that it's okay for me to love Jesus here. Mm-hmm. I'm still going to learn how to be a whatever.
Yeah, I think that's something the
but
church
this is part of my life too.
We haven't really done a good job of saying, I feel like we spend a lot of time saying, now when you go off to college, you're going to face this, this, and this, instead of saying, we've got Christian
There's
universities.
a way we can support you
that are going to.
What would you say to those families that are, maybe on the cusp of sending their children off to college or a few years out? Why Truett for Christian parents to really look into versus a secular university?
There's such a myriad, but to the parent, you first have to see it through their eyes. We're in a very education-friendly state where 80% to 100% of your tuition is paid for through Hope scholarships and Zell grants. What they don't see are myriad. Number one, you're not going to get a better education, get a lesser education. Mm-hmm. Frankly, even at Ivy League schools, how impressed are you that the newest Supreme Court justice from Harvard couldn't define what a woman was? Mm-hmm. That's the education you get. Mm-hmm. So it's a lack of education, whereas you go to Truett, you go into a science class, of course you're going to be taught evolution and creation, and then the confirmation of creation. Mm-hmm. You go to secular school, you only get evolution, so they don't even get the other side. They can't intelligently speak on other scientific matters except on one pervasive theory. Forget whether you believe in that, it's just not an education. Mm-hmm. But more than that, it is always this time of year that it happens that a mom or dad calls me and says, hey, we were looking at Truett, but we couldn't afford it in our minds, so we went to X university.
And now I'm losing my kid.
And now my kid's an agnostic.
Right.
And it happened last year, it happened the year before. And so I say, well, please take them to the campus. I just want to sit down and have lunch with them, and then I try to discuss with them the worldview that they are trying to attach themselves to. And that's the higher cost. It is a few $1,000s more, something much more.
And that's what I'd like to speak, just being a trustee there, y'all do everything that you can in your power to make it as affordable as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, not only affordable, but in private universities, we're the second in line as the most affordable of all private universities in Georgia. Mm-hmm. But if you compare it to other secular schools, when you add room and board, they are the same cost of us, if not more, because what happened is the room rates in all these universities are now privatized, are exponentially growing, whereas we built it into the residential student. But the other thing that happens that mom and dad usually don't see because they're so busy and they're working and they're raising family is their child has a call on their life.
Yes.
If they go to a secular school, they're going to get a good profession. Hmm. But 70% of those who get their degrees never use them for their lives because that's not where they're called. Right. And so now for the next few years, usually through their 20s, they start to search what they should have grasped in college, but mom and dad didn't think it was affordable. So I just tell them, we're not a salesman anyway. Come to the university. We'll pray over you. We'll show you around. We'll try to bless you. But it's not up to us It's up to the Lord to bring you there, and we want to welcome everyone. I would tell people that, okay, they didn't make the decision. They went to UGA, Georgia Tech, Kennesaw, whatever. What do we tell them now? And number one marker, if a student's going to lose his or her faith, and there are only two genders, his or her, only number one thing is if they get to a local church. Mm-hmm. Not even a parachurch group can guard them from what they're about to hammer. Mm-hmm. They can't. So they have to get themselves in a local church where there's a pastor who loves them and a people who love them and keep them accountable. If they're part of BCM, that's great, Wesleyan or whatever, but it's not going to guard their minds like it should.
Right. And I think we do, I know like through our young adults, we preach and we teach that God has placed you in a line of work or a profession for His honor and glory. But we're not teaching our children that. They're learning to go be nurses or to be doctors or to be plumbers or to be whatever it is that God's called them to be. And we tell them God's going to call you to something, but we don't teach them how to not just view that as their profession, but to view that as their way that God is allowing them to minister in this world. And that's one thing I feel like Truett does, is it teaches them that no matter what you're there to study, God's going to use that as a pathway for you to minister, to have opportunities to go on mission trips.
And that's the unique thing about Truett. I mean, you have a math teacher leading somebody to the Lord. Mm-hmm. Right. You have a history teacher praying for a student that's going through a hard time. That's the unique thing where you don't have that anywhere else. Mm-hmm.
Well, you have the Great Commission minor is purposeful. They have to take theology class. They have to take a Bible survey class. They have to do a missions class or a missions trip. They have to do a class on the free church so that when they leave, they're equipped to be a witness for Christ and to know what that fully enveloped and it prepares them to be one day mom and dad, and they don't simply have to say, hey, pastor, I don't know what this is. Can you teach them this? They're the ones supposed to be teaching the kids in Deuteronomy 6. And the pastor's no way he can carry on his shoulders all the parents' burdens. So we're trying to create not just great nurses and policemen and businessmen and ministers and so forth, trying to create good theologians, good witnesses for Christ, and you will never get that out there in the pagan world.
And if we're going to have, how many did you say, 70, 80, 90 million lost folks sitting out there, you're going to have to create that culture that can then go out and infect that world. I mean, that's the only way you're going to be able to do it, is for those homes to be truly Christian homes, and then them go out and begin to witness to that lost world that's there. I mean, that's the way it happens.
And we're not even seeing, this generation's not even getting married. Right. Think about Georgia's grown to over 10 million, about to hit 11 million people. They're not having children, they're having poodles. Right. When you go to the millennial communities, they're having dogs and cats and every other type of animal, but not children. And the surveys out now say a child won't leave your house as a child until they're 27 years old on average. They won't get married till they're 30, and they won't have children until they're 32 to 35 years old. You have a different swath, because when you ask the question, when do they leave church? Well, when they leave the home, usually at 18, to go to college or go to military or go get a job. Now you have the 18, and when do they come back? Every generation in America has come back when they have babies. And when they hold something that they realize they need something more than themselves to raise. Well, between 18 and 35, they're going to leave then and maybe never come back for the first time. Because it's almost 20 years of nothingness. That's where we have to reach them, both as a college and university system, as churches, because they don't want to be in the college and career class and get set up and hooked up. They're now professionals or workers over here, and it's a whole different group that you have to touch and reach.
Yeah, and I think I see that in our church. We got, some college and careers, but that gap in the late 20s to the early 30s, in some cases, is non-existent in some aspects.
Yeah. Unless they get married.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what, if they are married, you see that with kids. They're there.
Right. Because they realize that they want their children to know the Lord.
Yeah.
They want to know that their children are going to be okay for the rest of their lives and beyond. They want to have that type of security that they didn't necessarily have for themselves, or their parents didn't have for them, that desire.
Go ahead.
Just a question. Earlier I was talking about about sending our kids to a place like Truett, if all possible. What are other ways that we, as local churches like at Antioch or Isabella, what are other ways that we can support a Truett McConnell?
Well, there's a myriad of ways beyond that. The prayers are always most important. That is not superfluous. That's not frivolous in any ways. This generation is being attacked at a faster rate, at a more aggressive speed than any other generation in American history. So I think what it has to take is a partnership with the churches and the universities. I always tell the churches it's not the job of the churches to serve the school, it's the job of the school to serve the churches. The only way that's going to happen for the churches is if they take care of these kids in their own Sunday school classes and their VBSs. And the number one way to do so is stop giving up on this generation. The number of VBSs have decreased. The number of children's ministers, volunteers, all have decreased. And we wonder why they're not pattering feet going around the churches anymore. It's not for Truett's effect, it's for the sake of the church that we have to do this and invest the resources we have financially and human into this generation, starting at birth all the way through.
There's always been change. We've seen change all of our lives. In my business world and in your world, one of the biggest changes through COVID we saw, it's already happening, was a word I had never heard of called Zoom. And now, and we do so much in my business world virtually. I'll be glad when I never Zoom again. Anyhow, that's just been a change. What do you see is the greatest change taking place in the educational world, the university world especially? What's the next big change that you see out there on the horizon that's going to take place in the educational world?
Well, yeah, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, the whole thing. But here's the good news. We've now learned that teachers are not optional either. No kid is going to be able to do virtual school, I would submit, through 22 years old. And you saw that. The surveys for college students were awful. I mean, there's 77% said they hated it. 10% said they'll leave and not come back in a year unless it's residential. So, but the virtual sphere has changed so much, it's going to affect the country more than the city. Yep. Like you have one big city in Georgia, Atlanta, with 5 million. Then the rest of us are 5 million. Those 5 million are trying to leave because they can now work virtually, and they would rather be in the mountains of North Georgia or south of the Nat line and have space.
Yes.
So it's going to revolutionize, and the churches better be ready for that regard, because they're coming our way. You can't find homes in the areas because of that.
Yes.
They're done.
I mean, we've seen that even in our own neighborhood. We have several new neighbors that have come, and I say our neighborhood, we live in the country, and so our neighbors are very sporadic. But I can think of at least 3 homes lately that have been purchased in the last few years by people who are coming from California or from Florida, that are coming from large cities that say, we ask, what in the world, how did you learn about Sumner, Georgia? And they say, we want space, we want freedom, we want quiet, and I can work from home. Or I can work within a 2-hour radius of my house and be okay.
The other big thing that's changed, especially in the K through 12 community, is there's no trust in the school system anymore, because they closed down and they were run by the teachers' union instead of run by the teachers like it should be. And you had 500,000 homeschoolers before the pandemic. That's now 1.7 million, and they're predicting 5 million.
Wow.
Parents now realize they can educate their kids better and safer. And unless school systems clean up and stop teaching these heresies like CRT and intersectionality and trying to child groom and go back to education, the parents are just going to pull them out and say, we're done with you.
Do you see, I know at the university college level there was a lot of extended learning classes online, and I see a lot of that taking place. Is that going to grow and continue, do you
Only
think?
for those, I would say, 25 and older. They all tried it. We didn't. We had everybody come back and had a huge return because of it, and now we have people from all over the world coming to us because they want to be free.
In present.
So that I think the educational world has learned, education online is great, but usually that's for 25 and older, for master's degrees, doctorates, continuing education, but not for the 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Being
There's
a person
something-
myself that's in that position.
No, someone who had to complete their
I
learning.
need the online degree because I have a family, I have a full-time job, I have this sort of things. But I see, like, in being in that experience, it doesn't replace that initial university experience of
Education is relational.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're really, especially I would think from a Christian biblical worldview, relationship is so important. And it's very difficult to develop a relationship, which is the social aspect that children are lacking now, is that being able to relate to others, understanding relationally other people and how we interact with other people. And so that is something that is priceless. And it's something that we need to reteach how to value that, so that because when you can look at another person and not see them as an individual, and for us as Christian, as someone made in God's image, then it for us as Christians, it's hard to reach the lost when you cannot apply relationship to that. So it's very important that the education that we do, whether it's which is so important, why you need to be in church. We spoke on it this morning in our services, that there's a reason you come to church.
Right.
And yes, a portion of it is to worship and to hear from God. The other is where you interact
Fellowship.
with a body of like believers, so that you can armor yourself to go ye into the world and preach the gospel. And that nothing replaces that. No amount of social media outreach, no amount of whatever, TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat, whatever. Nothing replaces being able to sit down and have a conversation, especially to reach the lost.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So thank you very much. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. While at times I don't think we ever want to come across as if we are without hope, because as Christians we have the brightest shining hope there is. But it is our job to recognize the challenges that we are facing, and that we rise to the hope that God has planted within us. He planted within us a desire to go and to win souls for Christ. And so we hope you will take this information wherever you are in your life's journey right now, and go out, make a difference, talk truth every time you get the chance.